Welcome to Read and Learn English. Today, we are going to explore the incredible story of Richard Branson, a man who turned struggles into success and dreams into reality. If you ever feel small, powerless, or afraid of failure, this story is for you. It will show you that even the hardest beginnings do not decide your future. You will learn English, and at the same time, discover lessons about courage, creativity, and persistence. Many people feel stuck in life. They dream of freedom, adventure, and success, but feel trapped by rules, mistakes, or doubt. Maybe you have tried learning English but feel it is too hard. Maybe you have dreams that seem impossible. You are not alone. Richard Branson once felt exactly the same. As a boy in England, he struggled to read and write. Teachers called him stupid. He failed tests and could not keep up with his classmates. People around him thought he would never succeed. Yet Richard never let these challenges stop him. Instead, he discovered his own strengths. He was curious, creative, and brave. He started small, but dreamed big. He began by selling magazines as a teenager, then records, then music, and eventually built the Virgin Group, a collection of hundreds of companies that includes airlines, trains, mobile phones, and even space travel. From a dyslexic boy who struggled in school to a global entrepreneur and adventurer, Richard's journey is extraordinary. This story is not just about business or wealth. It is about hope, courage, and action. It shows that failure and doubt do not define who you are. It teaches us that mistakes are steps toward growth. Every small choice, every risk, and every effort can lead to amazing results. And as you listen, read, and follow along in English, you can practice your language skills while learning life lessons. Richard's story is also full of adventure and fun. He crossed oceans in boats, flew in balloons, and even reached the edge of space. He took risks that many people would never dare. Sometimes he failed, sometimes he almost lost everything, but he always tried again. His life teaches us that courage, creativity, persistence, and hope can turn impossible dreams into reality. By the end of this video, you will see that your struggles do not decide your ending. Your small steps today can become the big successes of tomorrow. Just like Richard Branson, you can act with courage, learn from mistakes, and dream bigger than you ever thought possible. Now, let's start this journey from the beginning. Richard's childhood. We will see how a boy who struggled in school became one of the most famous and inspiring entrepreneurs in the world. His story will not only motivate you but also help you improve your English step by step. A struggling student. Welcome, my friend. In this part of the story, you will practice your English with the life of young Richard Branson. You will see his struggles at school, his feelings of weakness, and also the small sparks of strength that were hidden inside him. As you listen and read, remember that this is not only about Richard, it is also about you. Richard Branson was born in England in 1950. From the very start, school was not easy for him. He had dyslexia, a condition that makes reading and writing very hard. When other children read books, Richard saw only a storm of letters. The words seemed to dance, change places, and escape from him. While others wrote answers quickly, Richard stayed behind, lost and frustrated. Teachers did not understand dyslexia in those days. They looked at Richard and thought he was lazy. They called him stupid. They told him he would never succeed. Imagine hearing this again and again as a child. Day after day, the people who were supposed to guide him made him feel small. Their words became heavy stones on his young shoulders. At times, Richard believed them. He felt like a failure when he saw red marks on his school papers. He felt alone when classmates laughed at him. He tried to study harder, but the letters on the page refused to stay still. For a boy who wanted to learn, school felt like a battlefield he could not win. But here is the contrast. Even though Richard failed in school, he did not fail in life. The classroom told him he was weak, but the world outside books showed him that he had other strengths. Richard discovered that he had great imagination. He could see opportunities where others saw nothing. He was also brave. He was willing to take risks, to try new things, to dream big even when he had no proof it was possible. Think of this lesson. Your weakness in one area does not decide your whole life. Maybe you are not good at math. Maybe you struggle with English grammar. Maybe people tell you that you are not smart enough. But that does not mean you cannot succeed. Just like Richard, you may have strengths in creativity, kindness, courage, or persistence. Sometimes your gift is simply in never giving up. Richard's school years were full of pain, but also small moments of discovery. He learned that he was good at talking to people. While he could not win prizes for essays, he could connect with classmates, share ideas, and inspire them. This skill would later help him lead teams and build companies. At the time, he did not know it, but his weakness with books pushed him to grow strong in people skills. One memory from his childhood shows this clearly. A teacher told Richard that he would either end up in prison or become a millionaire. The words were not meant as praise. The teacher thought Richard was too wild, too different, and too poor in studies to live a normal life. But Richard carried those words inside him. Millionaire. It sounded impossible then, but it planted a seed of belief that maybe he could prove people wrong. This is the power of contrast. In school, Richard was the boy at the bottom of the class. In his dreams, he was someone who could fly higher than anyone expected. Failure in one area pushed him to search for success in another. What looked like weakness became the starting point of strength. Now think about yourself. Maybe you are learning English and it feels slow. Maybe people laugh at your mistakes. Maybe you feel small next to others who are more advanced. But learning is not only about speed, it is about persistence. Richard's story shows that even when the world says you cannot, you can still rise if you keep trying. Outside of school, Richard started to explore what he loved. He enjoyed music. He loved adventure. He liked to think about new ideas and different ways to do things. Slowly, he began to understand that success for him would not come from books or exams. It would come from creativity, from daring to try something new. At night, when Richard felt the weight of failure at school, he also felt a fire inside. He wanted freedom. He wanted to build his own path. He did not know what that path was yet, but he knew it was not in memorizing facts or writing long essays. He wanted to create something with his own hands and his own imagination. And this is the lesson for you. Your weaknesses do not define your future. The world may say, you are not smart enough. Teachers may say, you will fail. But your story is not written by them. It is written by you. Richard Branson was called stupid, He was expected to be nothing, yet he became the founder of a global group of companies. If he could rise above his weakness, so can you. So let us carry this thought forward. The boy who could not read well, the boy who teachers rejected, did not stop. Instead, he turned to his passions. He wanted to explore creativity, adventure, and new ideas. And from this desire, the seeds of his first projects began to grow. Now, let us move to the next part of Richard's journey. How his struggles in school pushed him to look outside the classroom, where he discovered his love for creativity and the first steps of starting something of his own. First business, student magazine. Welcome again, my friend. In this part of Richard Branson's story, you will learn English through the story of a teenager who was brave enough to start something new. Many teenagers spend their days consuming music, magazines, or games. Richard was different. Instead of only consuming, he decided to create. This step was small, but it became the seed of his future empire. Richard was only 16 when the idea came. He wanted to make a magazine for students, written by students, and focused on the issues young people cared about. At that time, magazines were usually written by adults, with little interest in youth voices. Richard thought, why not create something for us, by us? It was a bold idea, especially for someone who struggled in school and had no money. Most people would have stopped there. They would have said, I am too young. I don't know how to make a magazine. I don't have money. But Richard was not like most people. He believed in trying first and learning on the way. He gathered a small team of friends who were also excited about the project. Together, they began to dream of their own magazine, called Student. The obstacles were huge. Printing a magazine costs money, and Richard had none. He did not come from a rich family, and his parents could not pay for everything. But Richard was creative. Instead of giving up, he thought about sponsors and advertisers. He went to local companies and told them about his idea. He said, we will make a magazine for young people. If you advertise in our magazine, students will see your brand. At first, many people laughed. Who would trust a 16-year-old boy with advertising money? But Richard was persistent. He kept knocking on doors. He kept sharing his vision. Slowly, a few people agreed. A record company gave him some support. A few businesses placed ads. It was not much, but it was enough to start. Finally, the first issue of Student Magazine was printed in 1968. Richard held the fresh copies in his hands with pride. The pages were filled with interviews, stories, and ideas that young people wanted to read. It was not perfect. Some pages looked simply, some articles were rough, but it was real. It was a dream made physical. The contrast is powerful here. Most teenagers at that time were only readers. They bought magazines and consumed content. Richard, on the other hand, became a creator. He did not wait for permission. He did not wait to grow older or become rich. He took a small step, and that step opened the path to bigger dreams. Running Student Magazine was not easy. Richard had to balance school, meetings, and deadlines. He had to write letters, convince advertisers, and work with printers. Many times he felt tired. Many times things went wrong. But every problem became a lesson. If a printer made a mistake, Richard learned to communicate better. If advertisers delayed payment, he learned to manage money. Every difficulty was a new classroom, but this time, Richard was not failing. He was growing. The magazine gave Richard more than experience. It gave him confidence. For the first time, he felt strong in something outside school. Teachers had said he was stupid, but now businessmen were listening to him. Readers were buying his magazine. His weakness in academics turned into strength in creativity and communication. One moment stands out. Richard managed to interview famous people for Student. He reached out to singers, writers, and politicians. He was not afraid to ask. Many said no, but some said yes. Each yes gave him more courage. He learned that even powerful people will listen if you dare to ask with confidence. The lesson here is simple. You do not need to wait until you are perfect to start something. Richard did not wait to read faster or write better. He started with what he had, a small idea, a few friends, and great courage. That was enough to begin. Think about your own life. Maybe you are waiting to improve your English before you speak. Maybe you are waiting for more money before you start a project. Maybe you are waiting for the right time. But Richard's story tells us, the right time is now. Start small, even if it is rough. Your first steps will teach you more than waiting ever will. For Richard, the magazine became a training ground for bigger things. He learned about media, advertising, and connecting with people. But he also learned something deeper. He learned that he loved building something from zero. He loved the process of taking an idea, fighting for it, and seeing it come alive. After some time, Richard began to notice another opportunity. Many of his readers loved music. They talked about records, bands, and songs. Music was a big part of student life. Richard saw a connection. If young people trusted Student Magazine, maybe they would also trust him to sell music. Slowly, the idea of a new business started to grow in his mind. This is how one step leads to another. The boy who struggled in school created a magazine. That magazine built his confidence and gave him skills. Those skills pointed him toward his next dream, selling records. One door opened to another because Richard dared to begin. So, as we close this chapter, remember this: you do not need to wait for perfect conditions to begin. If you have an idea, start small. If you have a dream, take one step. Richard's magazine was small, simple, and fragile, but it was also the beginning of a journey that would lead to the Virgin Group. Now let us continue with Richard's story. After creating a magazine, he would soon step into a new world, the music business, and this would change his life forever. Virgin Records is born. Richard Branson was still a teenager when he took his next step. After running Student Magazine, he noticed something important. Young people loved music. Every issue of the magazine had stories about bands, records, and concerts. Readers kept asking about the latest songs and where they could find them. Richard listened carefully. He realized that music was not only a passion for students, it was also a big business. At that time, buying records was not always easy. Many stores sold them at high prices. Some records were hard to find. Richard thought, what if I sell records to students for less money? What if I make it simple for them to buy? This thought became his next adventure. He began with a mail-order business. He placed small advertisements in magazines, offering popular records at lower prices. People could send a letter with money, and Richard would send the record by post. It was a simple idea, but it worked. Orders began to come in. Richard had no experience in the music industry, no big shop, no famous name, but he had energy, courage, and creativity. There were many problems at first. Some records arrived late. Sometimes the packages were damaged. Customers complained. But Richard did not give up. He answered letters, apologized, and worked hard to make customers happy. His honesty and effort built trust. People felt they could rely on him, even if he was young and new. Soon, Richard decided it was time for something bigger. He dreamed of opening a real store, a place where young people could come, listen to music, and feel free. With limited money, he found a small space in London. It was not fancy. The floors were old, the shelves simple, but Richard filled it with records, posters, and a lively spirit. When thinking of a name for the store, Richard and his friends laughed. They were virgins in business, completely new, inexperienced. Instead of hiding that, they embraced it. They called the shop Virgin Records. The name was bold, unusual, and easy to remember. What others saw as weakness, Richard turned into strength. The Virgin Record store quickly became more than a shop. It was a meeting place. Young people gathered there, listened to music, and discovered new artists. Richard created a relaxed atmosphere, very different from traditional stores. While other shops were strict and formal, Virgin was open, friendly, and cool. This contrast made Virgin special. Customers felt they were part of something new, something exciting, but the journey was not smooth. There were financial struggles. Rent, stock, and staff cost money, and profits were not always enough. Richard faced pressure from banks and suppliers. Many times he wondered if the business would collapse. Still, he kept going. He believed in the vision and worked day and night to keep the dream alive. Richard also faced another problem. He was not an insider in the music industry. The big companies had power, experience, and money. Virgin was small and unknown, but being an outsider gave Richard a unique advantage. He was not tied to the old rules. He could try new ideas. He could take risks others avoided. One of his clever moves was to focus on albums and artists that the big stores ignored. Virgin carried music that was hard to find elsewhere. This attracted passionate fans, who then became loyal customers. Richard showed that sometimes the outsider sees opportunities the insiders miss. The record store grew in popularity. Soon, Virgin became a recognized name among young people. What started as a joke about being new turned into a brand that symbolized freshness, rebellion, and independence. Richard had built more than a store. He had built an identity. This chapter of his life teaches us an important lesson. Many people think they must be experts before starting something. They believe they need years of experience, the right connections, or a perfect plan. But Richard's story proves the opposite. Sometimes being inexperienced allows you to see with fresh eyes. Sometimes not knowing the rules helps you create new ones. Think about your own journey. Maybe you are new to English. Maybe you are starting a small project. You might feel like an outsider, unsure and unprepared. But remember Richard's shop. He was also new, but he used that to his advantage. Your weakness can become your strength if you see it differently. Virgin Records did more than sell music. It planted the seed of a brand that would one day spread across airlines, hotels, and even space travel. But for now, it was a small store run by a young man with big dreams. Richard's courage to start, even without experience, was the key. the story does not end with selling records in a shop. Richard soon realized that selling music was not enough. He wanted to be part of creating music too. The next step would take him even deeper into the industry. He dreamed of starting a record label where Virgin would sign bands, produce albums, and challenge the giants of the music world. So, from a struggling student to a young entrepreneur, Richard had already shown one thing clearly. You do not need to be perfect to begin. Virgin was born from inexperience, but it became a symbol of energy and courage. And now, the next part of the story begins. After selling records, Richard was ready to make them. From running a store to recording music, his dream was only getting bigger. Taking risks with Virgin Music. Richard Branson's record store was doing well. Young people loved the energy of Virgin, and the shop became a popular place to discover new albums. But Richard was not satisfied. Selling records was exciting, but he wanted more. He wanted Virgin not only to sell music, but also to create it. This thought was risky, because running a record label was very different from running a shop. Still, Richard was ready to take the leap. Starting a record label meant signing artists, producing albums, and competing with giant companies that had money, power, and fame. Virgin had none of these things. They were small and inexperienced. Many people thought Richard was foolish for even trying. But Richard believed that sometimes being different is more powerful than being big. The first big chance came with a young musician named Mike Oldfield. Mike was quiet, shy, and unknown. His music was unusual, long, experimental, and not at all like the pop songs on the radio. Most record labels rejected him. They said his work was too strange, too risky. But when Richard listened, he heard something unique. He believed the world was ready for something new. So Virgin took the risk. In 1973, they released Mike Oldfield's album, Tubular Bells. At first, critics were unsure, but soon the album exploded in popularity. It became a huge success, selling millions of copies. People were surprised. The small Virgin label, led by a young man with little experience, had created one of the best-selling records of the decade. This was the power of risk. Where others saw danger, Richard saw opportunity. Where others laughed, Richard dared to believe. And the reward was enormous. Virgin was no longer just a shop. It was now a respected music label, with a hit that shook the industry. But Richard was not finished. His next big risk was even bolder. In the late 1970s, he signed a punk band called the Sex Pistols. At that time, the band was wild, loud, and controversial. They shocked people with their style, their words, and their behavior. Many record labels refused to work with them. They were considered too dangerous. Richard saw it differently. He thought, young people want a voice. They want music that speaks to their anger and passion. While others feared the Sex Pistols, Richard welcomed them. Virgin released their songs, and suddenly the music world was on fire. The band was both hated and loved, but no one could ignore them. The decision was risky. The Sex Pistols caused problems. Some stores refused to sell their records. Some radio stations banned their songs. But at the same time, young fans lined up to buy their music. Virgin became the label of rebellion, the label that dared to be different. The contrast here is clear. Most companies avoided risk, but Richard embraced it. Others played safe, signing only clean artists. Virgin instead gave a stage to the bold and unusual. This choice built Virgin's reputation as a brand for the brave, the fresh, and the fearless. Of course, risk also meant problems. There were scandals, financial struggles, and public criticism, but each risk brought growth. Richard learned that safe paths rarely lead to greatness. Success often comes when you take chances, when you try what others are too afraid to try. Think about this lesson for your own life. Maybe you are afraid to speak English in public because you might make mistakes. Maybe you avoid trying new things because of fear. Richard's story reminds us, growth lives on the other side of risk. If you only stay safe, you may never discover your true power. Virgin Music continued to grow. The label signed more artists, produced more albums, and built a strong identity. They were no longer outsiders. They were leaders of change in the music industry. But what made them powerful was not size or money. It was courage. Richard's willingness to risk made Virgin unique. One day, Richard reflected on these choices. He realized that the same energy could be used beyond music. If Virgin could break rules in one industry, why not try in others? Why stop at records when there were so many other worlds to explore? This thought planted a new seed. Richard's spirit was not only about music. It was about challenging limits, breaking rules, and believing in the impossible. Music was only the beginning. The story of Virgin Music shows us the beauty of being different. When the world says, "Don't do it," maybe that is the moment to be brave. When everyone says, "It will not work," maybe that is the time to try. Richard Branson did not build Virgin by playing safe. He built it by risking, failing, trying, and daring again. So, the young boy who once struggled in school, who once felt weak and lost, had now created a label that shook the world. And he was just getting started. The next step would take Virgin far beyond music, into industries no one expected. Let us move forward now. From the sound of records to the roar of airplanes, Richard's story takes flight. Expanding into airlines. Richard Branson had already shocked the music world with Virgin Records, but his dreams did not stop there. He had shown that courage and risk could build something powerful in music. Now, his eyes turned to the skies. It began with a simple frustration that many people had. Flying on airplanes often felt boring, stressful, and unfriendly. In the 1980s, Richard took a flight and was deeply disappointed by the service. The food was poor, the staff were not kind, and the whole experience felt cold. He thought, why should flying be so unpleasant? Why can't it be fun, exciting, and full of care? Most people simply accepted the situation. But Richard was different. He believed that if something was broken, you could fix it, even if the challenge was huge. The idea sounded crazy to almost everyone around him. Competing with big airlines was considered impossible. These companies had money, planes, airports, and power. Richard had none of these. He was young, inexperienced in aviation, and already busy running Virgin Music. People told him, "Stay away. You will lose everything." But Richard had learned from the past. Being an outsider could be an advantage. So, he began to dream of Virgin Atlantic, an airline that would put people first. His vision was simple. Make flying enjoyable. Give passengers better food, friendlier staff, and a touch of fun. Instead of feeling trapped in a metal box, people would feel like honored guests. The beginning was rough. Richard did not even own a plane. He had to rent one, a single Boeing 747, to start Virgin Atlantic. Imagine that. One small plane against the fleets of giants like British Airways. It was like David fighting Goliath. But Richard believed in the power of caring for people, and that belief gave him strength. When Virgin Atlantic launched its first flight in 1984, many thought it would fail immediately. But passengers were surprised. The seats were more comfortable. The entertainment was better. The staff were cheerful and treated customers with kindness. Richard even added small details like onboard ice cream and fun extras to make passengers smile. People noticed the difference. Still, the fight was not easy. The airline industry is tough, with high costs and constant competition. British Airways, the powerful rival, saw Virgin as a threat. They tried to crush the young airline, even using unfair tactics. Virgin was sued, attacked in the media, and pushed to the edge of collapse. At times, Richard nearly lost everything. But Richard refused to give up. He fought back with energy and creativity. He reminded his team why Virgin Atlantic existed, not just to fly planes, but to change how people felt in the sky. Slowly, the airline gained loyal customers. Passengers who tried Virgin often stayed with Virgin. They loved the friendly service, the fresh ideas, and the feeling of being valued. The contrast is striking. On one side were the airline giants, cold, strict, and focused only on profit. On the other side was Virgin Atlantic, small, young, and focused on people. And that difference made all the difference. The lesson here is powerful. You do not always need size to win. You need care. You need to see what others ignore and fix it with love and courage. Richard's airline proved that even one plane, when flown with passion, could compete with the biggest fleets in the world. For English learners and dreamers everywhere, the message is clear. Maybe you feel small compared to others. Maybe you think you cannot compete. But remember Richard's story. With one rented plane, he stood up against giants, and he won, not through force, but through service and care. Virgin Atlantic grew quickly. More planes joined the fleet. More routes opened. The airline became known around the world for its spirit of adventure and fun. Richard himself often greeted passengers, shaking hands, smiling, and asking about their journeys. He was not a distant boss. He was part of the experience. This chapter of his life showed again the pattern of his success. Richard saw problems, dared to dream of solutions, and risked everything to make them real. Where others saw danger, he saw possibility. And even when the fight was unfair, he kept going. Think of how this connects to your own struggles. Maybe you face bigger competitors at work. Maybe your English is weaker than others around you. Maybe life feels unfair. Richard's story teaches us, focus on people, focus on care, and keep going. Giants can fall, and the small can rise. But success in airlines did not mean Richard's path was easy. In fact, that was only the beginning of a long series of battles. Virgin Atlantic would face lawsuits, debt, and near disaster. And in other industries, Richard would also fail many times. Yet each failure was a step toward learning. So, as we leave this chapter, imagine it clearly. One young man, one rented plane, standing against the world's largest airlines. Everyone said it was impossible. Yet Virgin Atlantic took flight. And next, we will see how Richard's journey was not always smooth. From victories to failures, from growth to near collapse, His story shows that success is never a straight line. It is a fight, full of lessons, failures, and close calls. Every great journey is not only about success, it is also about failure, pain, and moments when everything feels lost. Richard Branson's story is no different. Behind the bright lights of Virgin Records and Virgin Atlantic, there were dark days. Days when the company was in trouble, when money was almost gone, and when Richard himself felt the heavy weight of failure. Virgin was always different. It was built with passion, with energy, with creativity, but passion alone could not pay bills. Running an airline was expensive. Renting planes, hiring staff, paying for fuel, every month the costs grew. Sometimes the money coming in was not enough to cover the money going out. Richard faced cash problems again and again. At times, the company was just days away from bankruptcy. And then came the lawsuits. The biggest airline in Britain, British Airways, saw Virgin Atlantic as a small but dangerous rival. They wanted to crush it. So they used unfair tactics. They spread false stories in newspapers. They tried to steal Virgin's customers. They even spied on Virgin flights. Richard felt attacked from every side. He fought back in court, but the legal battles drained time, money, and energy. There were nights when Richard lay awake, staring at the ceiling, asking himself, "Is this the end? Will everything I built disappear tomorrow?" He had put his heart into Virgin. If the company failed, he would not only lose money, he would lose his dream. He would lose the trust of his team. But here is the truth. Failure was not new to Richard. At school, teachers had called him stupid. In music, people had laughed at Virgin Records. In airlines, experts said he was crazy. Every time he had faced rejection, and every time he found a way forward. That same spirit helped him during these near bankruptcy days. Instead of hiding, Richard took action. When banks refused to lend money, he found creative ways to raise funds. When critics shouted louder, he stayed calm and focused. When lawsuits drained his energy, he fought with courage and even turned the fight into a victory. In the famous Dirty Tricks case against British Airways, Virgin won millions of pounds in compensation. Richard shared much of this money with his staff, thanking them for their loyalty. Still, the road was never smooth. Some Virgin businesses failed completely. Virgin Cola, Virgin Cars, and Virgin Brides. These ideas sounded exciting, but they collapsed. Richard invested time and money, but they did not work. Competitors were stronger, customers were not interested, and Richard had to accept the truth. Not every idea succeeds. Yet even in these failures, there were lessons. Virgin Cola taught him that passion is not enough. You need a real advantage. Virgin Cars showed him that timing matters. Sometimes the market is not ready. Each mistake became a teacher. And Richard, instead of breaking down, chose to learn and move forward. The contrast here is strong. On one side, we see the picture of failure, empty bank accounts, failed products, sleepless nights. On the other side, we see survival. Richard standing tall, learning from mistakes, and finding new paths. His story shows that failure is not the end. It is simply part of the journey. Imagine if Richard had given up after his first lawsuit. Imagine if he had quit when Virgin Cola failed. There would be no Virgin Atlantic today, no Virgin Galactic, no global Virgin brand. Everything we know would have ended, but he did not stop. He kept fighting even when the storm was strongest. This is a lesson for us, too. Maybe you feel like you are failing now. Maybe you tried something new and it did not work. Maybe you studied hard, but your English still feels weak. Maybe your dreams look too far away. Richard's story whispers to you, do not stop. Failure is not your enemy. It is your teacher. Every mistake shows you a new way forward. Richard once said, business opportunities are like buses. There's always another one coming. That mindset helped him survive. Even when one Virgin project failed, he knew another chance would arrive. He just needed to keep moving, to stay ready, to never lose hope. And slowly, step by step, Virgin survived the storms. Richard's courage and his team's loyalty carried them through the darkest days. The company did not just live, it grew. Out of lawsuits came strength. Out of failures came wisdom. Out of near bankruptcy came resilience. When you think about Richard Branson today, it is easy to see only the victories. But behind each victory were failures and close calls. And maybe this is the most important part of his journey. Success without failure is just luck. Success through failure is strength. As English learners, you can take this message into your own journey. You may make mistakes when you speak. You may forget words. You may feel embarrassed. But those mistakes are not the end. They are the path. Each error teaches you. Each failure makes you stronger. Just like Richard, you can survive the storms and grow. So, remember this contrast. Failure is not falling down. Failure is staying down. Richard always stood back up. And you can too. With Virgin still alive, still growing, Richard looked beyond business problems. His spirit of adventure was calling him. Surviving failures gave him courage for something even bigger. He had fought battles in business. Now he wanted to chase dreams beyond the earth itself. The adventurer spirit. Richard Branson was not only a businessman. Deep inside, he was also an adventurer. He believed life was not just about making money. Life was about living fully, about chasing dreams, about testing limits. And so, when Virgin businesses began to grow, Richard turned his eyes to something even wilder: world records, great challenges, and dangerous adventures. It started with the ocean. Richard wanted to cross the Atlantic in the fastest boat. Most people thought he was foolish. He had never trained as a professional sailor. He had no long history of competing in sea races. But he had courage, curiosity, and a hunger for adventure. With his team, he built a powerful speedboat called Virgin Atlantic Challenger. The first attempt ended in disaster. The boat hit waves, broke apart, and sank. Richard and his team were pulled from the cold water just in time. It was a failure, and it was dangerous. Newspapers mocked him. Critics said, "This man is reckless. He should stop." But Richard did not stop. He saw failure as a teacher. He studied what went wrong, rebuilt, and tried again. The second boat, Virgin Atlantic Challenger 2, made it across the Atlantic in record time. What first looked like a stupid dream turned into history. But Richard was not satisfied. The sea was only the beginning. He wanted to conquer the sky. He dreamed of flying across oceans in hot air balloons, something few had ever tried. The idea was crazy. Balloons are fragile. Weather is unpredictable. One mistake could mean death. Yet Richard said yes. In 1987, he climbed into a balloon called Virgin Atlantic Flyer. The plan: fly across the Atlantic from Maine to Ireland. During the journey, the balloon rose too high, the air became thin, and temperatures dropped below freezing. Richard's hands were numb, his body shaking, but he held on. After days of fighting wind and fear, the balloon landed safely. Once again, Richard had done what others thought impossible. Then came an even bigger challenge: crossing the Pacific Ocean. In 1991, he set off in a balloon called Virgin Pacific Flyer. The distance was longer, the dangers greater. Storms pushed the balloon off course. At times, Richard and his co-pilot thought they would not survive. But somehow, they reached their goal, making history with the longest balloon flight at that time. Still, not all adventures ended in victory. Richard failed many times. Balloons crashed. Boats sank. Dreams broke. In one attempt, his balloon went down in the Algerian desert. In another, he barely escaped alive when the balloon caught fire. Each time, people told him to stop, to be safe, to live quietly. But Richard's spirit would not allow it. He believed true life begins outside the comfort zone. The contrast is powerful. On one side, there is danger, sinking in icy water, crashing in empty deserts, almost dying in the sky. On the other side, there is courage, breaking records, proving the impossible, inspiring millions. Richard showed the world that adventure is not about avoiding risk. It is about daring to live fully, even when failure comes. For English learners, this lesson is important. Speaking a new language can feel like standing on the edge of a balloon basket, high above the earth. It feels scary. You may fail. You may make mistakes. But just like Richard, you cannot let fear stop you. Every attempt, even if it feels embarrassing, brings you closer to success. Richard often said that adventure is a mindset. It is about saying yes to life. It is about trying something new, even when you feel unready. He did not succeed because he was fearless. He succeeded because he acted in spite of fear. That is the secret. Imagine if Richard had chosen a safe life. Imagine if he had said, "I will stay home. I will not risk myself." We would not have his balloon flights, his boat records, or his stories of courage. The world would be less colorful. His life would be smaller, and he would not be the Richard Branson we know today. Adventure gave him more than records. It gave him perspective. When you risk everything in the sky or the sea, you see how small fear really is. You realize that failure does not kill you. It grows you. These experiences made Richard stronger as a leader, braver as a dreamer, and wiser as a human being. And this is the lesson for us. Life itself is an adventure. You do not need a balloon or a boat. Every time you try something new, you are living bravely. Every time you take a step into the unknown, you are choosing adventure. Maybe for you, that adventure is learning English. Maybe it is starting a new job. Maybe it is moving to a new country. Whatever it is, remember Richard's example. Fear is normal, but courage is stronger. Richard's adventurer spirit did not stop with boats and balloons. He began to look higher, far beyond the earth. If he could cross oceans, why not cross into space? If he could break records on the sea and in the sky, why not chase the stars? His courage and his failures had prepared him for something even greater. The boy who once struggled in school, the young man who failed many times, the entrepreneur who almost lost everything, he was now ready to dream the biggest dream of all. His eyes turned upward, to the black sky, to the universe. Richard Branson's next adventure would not just be about oceans and balloons, it would be about space itself. Virgin Galactic and the Space Dream. Richard Branson had already achieved extraordinary things on Earth. He had built record stores, airlines, and adventure companies. He had crossed oceans in boats and skies in balloons. Yet his dreams continued to grow. He looked up at the stars and thought, why should space belong only to astronauts? Why can't everyone have the chance to see the Earth from above? This thought planted the seed of Virgin Galactic. Virgin Galactic was Richard's boldest idea yet. He wanted to create a company that could take ordinary people into space. Not scientists, not billionaires. Regular people who dreamed of flying beyond the atmosphere. It was a revolutionary idea, and many laughed. Critics said, it's impossible. Space is for governments, not private companies. You will fail. But Richard had learned a long time ago that the louder people laugh, the closer you may be to something important. He began assembling a team of engineers, pilots, and innovators. They worked tirelessly to design spaceships that could safely carry humans beyond the atmosphere. The technology was difficult. Every detail had to be precise. The risks were high and the costs were enormous. Some people called him reckless. Others thought he had lost touch with reality. But Richard stayed focused. He believed in dreaming big and acting bigger. Virgin Galactic was not just about profit. It was about inspiration. He wanted to give people hope, excitement, and a vision of what was possible. If ordinary humans could touch the sky, maybe they could also achieve dreams they had never imagined before. The development of Virgin Galactic was not smooth. There were failures and delays. Test flights did not always go as planned. Sometimes engineers faced problems with engines, fuel, or design. Each challenge was intense, but Richard treated every obstacle as a lesson. He did not give up. He reminded his team, we are creating history. We are not here to be small. We are here to dream big. This mindset changed the culture at Virgin Galactic. The team worked with courage, creativity, and a sense of mission. Every test flight, every calculation, every small success built confidence. Slowly, the dream moved closer to reality. People started believing that private space travel could be possible. Contrast is powerful in this story. On one side, there were the doubters, scientists, journalists, and competitors who said it could not be done. On the other side, there was Richard and his team. Dreamers who acted, learning from every mistake, growing stronger with every setback. They showed that courage and persistence can turn imagination into reality. Richard often said that dreams are not just for the dreamer. Big dreams inspire others. When people saw Virgin Galactic, they imagined themselves in space. They imagined a world where limits are broken, where ordinary humans could achieve extraordinary experiences. His dream became a symbol of hope, curiosity, and courage for millions. For English learners, the lesson is clear. Just like learning a new language, space travel seems impossible at first. You might struggle, fail, and feel scared, but step by step, like Richard's team, progress is possible. Every practice session, every new word learned, every small success brings you closer to your dream. Richard's vision of space was not only about technology, it was about the human spirit. He believed that seeing Earth from space would change perspectives. People would care more about each other, about the planet, and about what is truly important in life. The biggest dreams often inspire the world, not just the person who dares to dream. In 2004, Virgin Galactic began taking shape with its first spacecraft tests. In 2018, Richard himself flew to the edge of space, becoming one of the first private citizens to experience the view beyond our world. It was a moment of triumph, not only for him, but for humanity's potential. Richard Branson's journey from a dyslexic, struggling student to a space pioneer shows the power of dreaming without limits. It teaches us that the size of a dream matters more than the size of a person. Courage, persistence, and action can transform even the wildest ideas into reality. Virgin Galactic also reminds us that failure and criticism are normal. Every time Richard was laughed at or doubted, he kept moving. Every challenge became an opportunity to learn and improve. His story inspires people everywhere to reach for the stars, no matter how impossible the goal seems. As we leave the story of Virgin Galactic, think about your own dreams. Maybe your dream is small, like improving English. Or maybe it is big, like traveling, starting a business, or creating something new. No matter the size, the lesson is the same. Dream, act, persist, and inspire. From reaching the sky to touching space, Richard's journey reminds us that bold dreams change not only your life, but the lives of many. His adventure is far from ordinary, and it shows that if you dare to dream and act, the impossible becomes possible. Global recognition and impact. Richard Branson's journey from a struggling student to a fearless adventurer brought him worldwide attention. Virgin, which began as a small record store, had grown into hundreds of companies. Virgin Records, Virgin Atlantic, Virgin Galactic, Virgin Trains, Virgin Mobile. Each business reflected Richard's daring, creativity, and belief in people. The world began to see him not only as a businessman, but as an innovator, a dreamer, and a leader who defied the odds. Despite his immense wealth, Richard became one of the richest men in the United Kingdom. He remained playful, curious, and approachable. He did not let money or fame change who he was. Even as he owned airlines, music labels, and space ventures, he still laughed, made jokes, and pursued adventures that made him feel alive. His energy inspired both employees and fans worldwide. People admired him not only for what he had built, but for how he approached life, with joy, courage, and curiosity. The contrast in his story is remarkable. Imagine a dyslexic boy failing in school, often told he was stupid, struggling to read and write. That same boy, through persistence, imagination, and risk-taking, became a global business leader. He stood on the world stage, shaking hands with presidents, explorers, and scientists. He became proof that a difficult start does not determine your ending. Richard's influence extended far beyond business. Virgin companies changed industries. Virgin Atlantic raised standards in aviation, forcing other airlines to improve service. Virgin Mobile made communication more accessible and affordable. Virgin Galactic made space exploration a dream not only for governments but also for ordinary people. Each success created new opportunities for others, inspiring employees, customers, and young dreamers to believe in themselves. His leadership style was unusual but effective. He valued ideas over titles. He listened to employees, encouraged creativity, and accepted mistakes as part of growth. Richard believed that freedom and trust were more important than rigid rules. This approach allowed innovation to thrive in his companies. People were motivated not by fear, but by inspiration and purpose. Yet, Richard never forgot his early struggles. He often spoke about his dyslexia and school failures, sharing openly how difficult it was to learn in a traditional way. He encouraged students, entrepreneurs, and dreamers to focus on their strengths, not their weaknesses. His message was clear: your starting point may be hard, but it does not define your journey. Anyone can reach extraordinary heights with courage, persistence, and creativity. The story of Richard Branson also teaches an important lesson about balance. Success is not only about money or fame, it is about living fully. Richard continued to pursue adventures, record-breaking attempts, and philanthropic projects. He climbed mountains, crossed oceans, and pushed boundaries in both business and life. His example shows that true impact comes from combining passion, risk-taking, and service to others. For English learners and dreamers, this is a powerful reminder. You may face struggles in school or at work. You may feel small compared to others. But these are not barriers. They are starting points. Like Richard, you can use creativity, courage, and persistence to build your path. Mistakes, failures, and challenges are not the end. They are part of the journey that shapes your future. Richard's global recognition also highlights the importance of vision. He did not aim to be rich just for wealth's sake. He wanted to improve industries, inspire people, and create experiences that mattered. His vision gave direction to his actions, and that vision continues to guide the Virgin Group today. As we reflect on Richard's journey, notice the lessons for your own life. You do not need to start perfect. You do not need to follow a clear path. What matters is your willingness to act, to learn, and to dream bigger than fear. Richard's story reminds us that limitations are often in the mind, not in reality. From a boy struggling to read to a man shaping industries and inspiring millions, Richard Branson embodies the truth that beginnings do not determine endings. Your challenges, mistakes, and fears can become fuel for your journey. You can grow, succeed, and even inspire others no matter where you start. Now, as we look at his global achievements and impact, the next step is personal. How can you take these lessons into your own life? How can you turn small actions, courage, and creativity into your own success story? That is the question we will explore in the final section. Lessons for your life. Imagine yourself watching this video. Maybe you feel small. Maybe you feel weak. Maybe life seems unfair, and your dreams feel far away. You might struggle with learning English or feel scared to try something new. You may think, I am not smart enough, or I cannot do it. But let me tell you a story that can change how you see yourself. Richard Branson once felt just like this. He struggled in school. Teachers called him stupid because he could not read and write like others. He failed tests. He was told he would not succeed. But Richard did not stop. He found his own way to learn, to explore, and to act. Step by step, he built a life full of adventure, success, and inspiration. The first lesson is courage. Richard was afraid many times. Starting Virgin Records, Virgin Atlantic, or Virgin Galactic was risky. He could have failed, lost money, or been embarrassed, but he chose to act in spite of fear. Courage does not mean you are not scared. It means you do not let fear stop you. Every time you speak English, even when you make mistakes, you practice courage. Every time you try something new, you are following this lesson. The second lesson is creativity. Richard did not follow the rules. He looked for new ideas. He thought, why can't flying be fun? Why can't music be exciting? Why can't everyone go to space? He used imagination to solve problems. You can do the same. English learning, work, or personal challenges all improve when you use creativity. Even small solutions can grow into big successes. The third lesson is risk-taking. Richard took risks every day. He started businesses with no money or experience. He signed unknown musicians. He crossed oceans and flew balloons. Sometimes he failed. Sometimes he almost lost everything. But risks often bring the biggest rewards. You may feel afraid to speak English in public, to start a new job, or to try a new hobby. Take the step anyway. Small risks grow your confidence and open new doors. Persistence is the fourth lesson. Richard failed many times. School exams, business projects, adventures. He did not give up. He learned, tried again, and improved. Life will test you too. You will make mistakes in learning, in work, or in personal goals. But persistence means you keep going, step by step, no matter how slow. Every small effort builds your future. The fifth lesson is hope. Richard believed in his dreams, even when others laughed. He believed that a small boy from a dyslexic background could change industries and reach space. He showed that your beginning does not limit your ending. No matter your current situation, hope gives you energy to move forward. English learners, dreamers, and young entrepreneurs, hope is your fuel. Contrast is important. You can give up and stay where you are, or you can take one small step today and grow. Giving up is easy. Moving forward is hard, but it creates progress. Richard chose to move forward, and so can you. He teaches us that step-by-step growth is stronger than sudden luck. Your story may be slow, but it is yours, and it can reach incredible heights. Think about how Richard approached life. He combined courage, creativity, risk, persistence, and hope. He failed, he fell, he struggled, yet he kept building. Each experience, each challenge, each failure became a lesson. He turned obstacles into opportunities. You can do the same. Your struggles, mistakes, and fears are not your limits. They are your teachers. Your life is like a blank page. Each day, each choice, each effort adds a sentence to your story. You may feel weak, poor, or unsure, but you are still writing your journey. Every word you learn in English, every step you take toward your goal, is a step toward success. Remember, Richard started small, just like you. He had doubts, fears, and failures, but he kept going, and his story became extraordinary. So now, it is your turn. Take courage, be creative, take risks, keep going, even when it is hard. Have hope for your future. Learn from every mistake. Practice English, dream big, and act step by step. Your story is still being written. You can make it amazing. If Richard can do it, so can you. Start today. One small step now can change everything. Speak one sentence, try one idea, take one action. Do not wait. Your journey, your success, and your adventure are waiting. The world is full of opportunities, and the first step is yours. Believe in yourself and begin. Richard Branson's story shows us something powerful. Where you start does not decide where you finish. He was once a dyslexic boy who struggled in school, often told he was stupid and unlikely to succeed. He faced failures, criticism, and dangers many times. Yet he kept dreaming, acting, and learning. Today, He leads the Virgin Group, inspires millions, and even reaches space. His journey reminds us that persistence, courage, creativity, and hope can overcome any challenge. Think about your own life. Maybe you feel small, uncertain, or afraid of failure. Perhaps learning English feels slow and difficult. Maybe your dreams seem far away or impossible. But Richard's life proves something important. Small steps, repeated every day, can lead to incredible achievements. Mistakes and failures are not the end. They are lessons. Your fears are not barriers. They are signs that you are growing. Contrast his beginning and his success. A boy who struggled to read became a global business leader and adventurer. A man who faced constant doubt created companies that changed industries. His journey is proof that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. And your story can be the same. Every effort you make, every challenge you face, every small success adds a chapter to your life. Now is the moment to take action. Start small, but start today. Speak one English sentence, try a new idea, or take a small step toward your goal. Learn from mistakes, keep going, and believe in yourself. Just as Richard Branson never gave up on his dreams, you can keep building yours. Your story is still being written. You have the power to create a future full of possibilities. This video was not only for motivation, it is also for your English practice. Listen, read, and speak along to improve your skills while learning life lessons. You can grow your mind, your language, and your dreams at the same time. Remember, every small action matters. Your journey starts now. Take courage. Take action. Keep learning. Believe in yourself. And step by step, you can achieve more than you ever imagined. The world is waiting for your story. Make it amazing.